Oh, good afternoon. I'm Grenville Crawford. My father owns the site of Bytham Castle, which is one of the largest medieval sites in Britain. I'd like to read a little to you of something of the astonishing history, if I may. There can be few places in Britain that can reasonably lay claim to being the cradle of world history, but in the case of Castle Bytham, this claim comes as close as it gets. The once great park of Bytham Castle holds the site of a Roman villa, but 800 years of mystery passed in the Dark Ages before records were accurately kept. One of the first owners of the Norman castle was Princess Adelaide of Normandy, William the Conqueror's sister, the first Norman princess of Britain. She and her husband Oud were given Bytham, and they moved in about 3 years after the Battle of Hastings. They raised their son Stephen here. He was the 9th great-grandfather of Robert the Bruce, King of Scotland, and the 22nd great-grandfather of George Washington, the first President of the United States of America. Princess Adelaide, through a previous marriage, was a great-grandmother of King Malcolm of Scotland. A most remarkable history so far, but please listen for a few minutes. Bytham Castle, the medieval fish breeding system and medieval windmill foundations make Bytham one of the largest medieval sites in Britain, with an equally impressive history. The castle, built on the site of Earl Morcar's Anglo-Saxon manor, was one of the first 50 Norman castles to be built in Britain. First built to house William the Conqueror's niece, who was murdered by her husband Drogo, who then fled to Flanders. William, now King of England, gave Bytham to his sister Adelaide, or Adelise, now being the first Norman princess of England. Adelaide was married to the former Count of Champagne, Troyes and Meaux. He was now Earl of Albemarle. They raised their son Stephen here. Stephen's father died in Pontefract Castle dungeon after trying to remove King William Rufus and place Stephen on the throne. He died in the dungeon. Stephen went on crusade to Antioch. This was just the beginning of a remarkable history which took Bytham through 400 years of a golden age of knights and chivalry. The castle had a most noble and turbulent history as one of Britain's pivotal castles. Between 1119 and 1314, the Knights Templar, possibly the most mysterious of holy orders, gained great power in Europe and were even claimed to be guardians of the Holy Grail. During this time, Castle Bytham was home to the Earls of Albemarle, great Crusader knights, very powerful and famous in their day. William le Gros, Earl of Albemarle, lived at Bytham and built many abbeys and churches. He founded Vallis Dei Abbey, Valley of God, a name of significance to the Templars, at Bytham in 1147, but only 2 years later was moved to Grimsthorpe, 4 miles away, and became known as Vordy Abbey. William became the only ever Earl of York after commanding his army at the Battle of the Standard in Yorkshire. His daughter, Hawise, who was described as being more of a man than a woman, married William de Fours I, who then became Earl of Albemarle. He went on crusade with King Richard the Lionheart in 1190 to 1191. He commanded the Poitevin Gascon squadron of 33 ships and was one of 5 barons commanding the main army against Saladin. His son was one of the 25 barons appointed to enforce the Magna Carta. In total, King Richard's army exceeded 20,000 men, most of whom sailed to the Holy Land, known as Outremer, by sea in 126 ships, 24 large transport vessels known as busses, and 39 war galleys. Baldwin de Bethune, a famous knight whose brother Conan was governor of Constantinople, fought alongside King Richard as one of his 40 household knights. He knew William de Fours well and married Hawise after William died and became Earl of Albemarle. His daughter Alice married William Marshal, the 2nd Earl of Pembroke, but was murdered while heavily pregnant and was buried at St Paul's Cathedral. William Marshal, the famous Templar, was buried in Temple Church, London, next to his father. Their stone effigies can still be seen on the floor today and featured in the film The Da Vinci Code. After the Crusade, most knights made their own way home. King Richard was a hunted man disguised as a Templar. Baldwin de Bethune was captured by the Lord of Yarra and was forced to find ransom for Richard. He somehow survived the ordeal and returned to Bytham and died at Burstwick Castle in South Yorkshire on the 14th of October 1212. Being in England at the time of his death and involved with Templar activities as a friend of William Marshall, Baldwin may have become a Templar. If so, he could be one of the unknown stone effigies in Temple Church. Hawise, being a very rich woman, was no stranger to powerful men. Her first husband was Sir William Mandeville, Earl of Essex. Upon marriage he became Earl of Albemarle and owned Bytham. He was a most famous knight and involved with the Knights Hospitaller. As King Richard's most trusted friend, he carried the crown at Richard's coronation. He died at Gisors in Normandy of fever shortly before the Lionheart Crusade. After William de Fours II died, William de Fours III, a most notorious and rebellious knight, forced King Henry III to besiege Bytham Castle in February 1221. The king spent 2 weeks at Castle Bytham and totally destroyed the castle. The country was taxed to pay for it, and it was one of the major castle sieges of the 13th century. William survived by escaping to Yorkshire and was eventually pardoned, and even became the king's friend representing him abroad, which gives us good insight as to the man's character. William went on crusade and died at sea on his way to the Holy Land on the 26th of March 1242. His daughter Aveline married Edmund Crouchback and was the first bride ever to be married in Westminster Abbey. She died in childbirth and her tomb is at the High Altar. Today, Bytham's huge ramparts are inhabited by grazing cattle and ghosts of the past. Long ago, the castle had 3 chapels, St Mary, St Thomas the Martyr and St Mary Magdalene Chapel, which being below ground still hides inside the main keep mound with the dungeons which housed prisoners during the Great Siege of 1221, and was one of 5 castles in Britain to have 2 barbicans. Bytham was rebuilt by the Colvilles, Lords of Bytham, and Crusader Knights. This great fortress eventually became the palatial home of Lady Alicia of Bytham, thought to be the richest woman in Britain. As a relative of Mary de Bohun, Alicia's home was chosen by Henry Bolingbroke to raise his children after Mary died young. The Countess of Hereford took the children to Bytham in Henry's absence. Young Philippa later became the Queen of Norway, Denmark and Sweden. Blanche, her little sister, became the Princess of the Holy Roman Empire. Her crown is in Munich Museum and is the oldest English crown in existence. Thomas, Duke of Clarence, became the first ever Admiral of England. John, Duke of Bedford, fought at Agincourt with their brother Henry V, while Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, acted as King of England in Henry's absence. Henry V was too old to be raised at Bytham and was tutored in Leicester. Lady Alicia married Sir Anquetil Malory. He leased Kirkby Mallory to the Abbey of Leicester, and Bytham became the main Mallory seat. Sir Thomas Malory, a relative, possibly their nephew, wrote the Arthurian legends in Le Morte d'Arthur. The castle ownership became fragmented through the Greys of Codnor, and Bytham became derelict in about 1500, possibly burning down. Sir Willoughby Daresby married Maria de Salinas, Catherine of Aragon's lady-in-waiting, and lived at Grimthorpe Castle 4 miles away. They were said to be owners of Bytham Castle ruins in 1500s. And so was the end of a golden age, when Bytham Castle ruled supreme. It is one of the most important medieval sites in Britain.